Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video, what we're going to do is cover Strapi version 4. So we're going to learn the ins and outs of Strapi, and we're also going to build a real-life application that utilizes Strapi. So you know what, let's just get right into it and let's ask the question, what is Strapi? Well, Strapi is known as a headless CMS. And this might not mean anything to you. What is a headless CMS? Well, let's actually just take it one word at a time. And we're going to begin with CMS. What is a CMS? Well, CMS stands for Content Management System. So it is a system that manages your content. Now that might not make all too much sense as well. So let's actually look at a real life example. So I'm on this website, and this website was built utilizing Strapi. So over here you can see that we have a bunch of different restaurants. So this website is listing a bunch of different restaurants. And when you click on the restaurant, you can see that there's a bunch of information within each restaurant. So we have the restaurant name, we have a bunch of image, we have opening hours, what's the cooking is French, what neighborhood it's in, 9th neighborhood, we have the phone number, we have the website, we have everything. So you can see here that we have a bunch of things. So this right here, all this information, the name, the image, the opening hours, the details, the locations, all of this is content. And actually, if we go all the way back over here, each particular restaurant is content as well. So where do we store? And where do we manage this content? Well, we can use a content management system like Strapi. So I actually went ahead and kind of tried to duplicate a content management system for this particular website. So over here, this is Strapi itself, and you can see you have categories. So we have categories, so we can group restaurants into categories. Over here we have, restaurants. And if we want, what we can do is we can actually add a new restaurant. So if you want, we can go ahead and add maybe you want to add this restaurant over here. So we can go ahead and we can add a restaurant, we can add the name, we can add the description, we can add, the opening hours, we can also add some images. So you can see here, this CMS, Strapi, is acting as a content management system where we can manage our restaurant content. And what's great about Strapi is it handles really a lot of the backend capabilities. So we don't have to worry about configuring a database. We don't have to worry about, authentication. All we have to do is very simply just add the content, and it's going to just save that content to our database. So again, you can see here that it's a content management system. So I hope that makes it clear. Now, what does headless mean? So it's a headless CMS. Well, headless basically means that it is completely isolated from the UI. So sometimes content management systems, what they do is they allow you to manage your content, and they also create the UI itself. So for example, over here, maybe we wanted to add a restaurant. Well, we would also have to create this UI through that content management system. A headless CMS is, hey, all we want to do is manage the content, and we're going to serve that data to you, and you are responsible for the front end. So you can configure, you can make the front end however way you want, and Strapi is just responsible for serving that data to you. So with a headless CMS, you can have an Angular application, you can have a React application, you can have a Vue application, you can have just plain old vanilla JavaScript. You can have whatever front-end application you want, and you can configure it and make it look as, however way you want. And all you have to do is very simply just make a request to Strapi, asking it for, restaurant data or categories data, and Strapi just sends it back. So it is not associated to any part of the UI. So you can create the UI however way you want and just make requests to get data. And what's really great about Strapi is if you are a GraphQL fanatic, then you can actually configure Strapi to, instead of being a RESTful API, we can just have it be a GraphQL server. So we can make, queries or mutations and to Strapi, and we can actually get that inside of our front end. So I hope that is clear, and we are actually going to be duplicating what we have here. So you can see this website, what we're going to want to do is we want to create Strapi so that we can actually serve this data. Now we're not going to be creating the front end aspect of this because really all the front end is just making requests to Strapi, to the server Strapi, and then it creates the UI and renders those data. So we're not going to worry about that. I really just want to focus on the Strapi portion. But again, we're going to try to replicate this in terms of the server side capabilities and return the data that is necessary. Now, one thing that I want to note is that we're not going to cover absolutely every single case over here because this is a relatively large website and there's a lot of things that we would have to do in order to complete this, and this course would get very long. So we're just going to focus on kind of the main things, and trust me, you're still going to learn quite a bit of Strapi. So let's just get right into it. In this section of the course, what we're going to do is learn how to create a Strapi application. And luckily, this is really, really easy. All you have to do is open up your terminal or your command prompt if you're on Windows and execute a very simple command. So I opened up my terminal, and as you can see, I moved into my desktop directory because this is where I want to create my Strapi application. Now, in order to execute this command and create a Strapi app, you first need to have Node installed. So make sure you have Node installed on your local machine. You can do a very quick check by doing node-v, and what this should do is give you the version of Node that you have installed. So if you get any version, that means, well, you have it installed. If you get an error saying that, hey, I don't know what Node is, that means you don't have it installed, and you should go on Google, just search Node download, find the web page. It's a really, really easy process and download. So with that being said, let's actually execute the command to create a Strapi application. So the command is npx and then create Strapi app. So create Strapi app, and then we're going to append at latest to get the latest version, which is version 4. And then we're going to do space, and we're going to give our Strapi app a name. So we're going to say, restaurant CMS. Let's just call it that, restaurant CMS. And then we're going to add a flag. And this is an optional flag, but for development purposes, I'm going to add the @ quick start flag. And let me just, so you can see it all in one line, let me just make this a little bit bigger. And what this does is it's going to do a lot of configuration for us. So for example, it's going to configure our database for us. It's going to utilize a SQLite database, and that SQLite database is going to live on our local machine. And that way we don't have to actually create a Postgres database and then get the configuration, get the credentials, and configure it with this Strapi application. It just makes development a lot easier. Once this application is ready for production, we can very easily change all of these things that we utilized with Quick Start. For example, if you wanted to use a Postgres database, we can just get those credentials and add them inside of the end file that is created with this application. And I'll show you guys that in a quick second. So let's go ahead and execute this. Now, I already executed this because this is going to take quite a long time to run, and I just want this course to be as quick as possible. So you can, of course, pause the video if you want. So once you execute this, it's going to say, hey, it's not going to work because you already created one. Maybe if I added another S in there, you can see the process is starting up. And you can see here that I have a new folder inside of my application. So that's really all you have to do. I'm not going to go ahead with this process because I already did this. And once you're in there, what I want you to do is to move into that directory. So CT into that directory. And what I want you to do is a yarn install. So do a yarn install. The reason why I want you to do a yarn install is because there's actually a known bug right now that occurs when you use npm. And if you don't get that bug, completely fine. You can try it with npm install, but I would suggest stick with yarn. Yarn, I think, is probably the more popular one at this point. So do yarn install. If you don't have yarn installed, you can just simply do a npm install -yarn, and you can give it the global flag, and that should install yarn inside of your local machine. So do a yarn install. Again, I already did this. And then once you do that, what you can do is you can execute yarn develop. So let's go ahead and execute that. And I actually have to add sudo yarn develop. You might not have to do this and have to write my password. Let's go ahead and write that. And then what we're doing is we're executing something called Strapi develop. And now you can see that, well, our application is running on localhost 1337. So let's actually just copy this right now, and let's go here, and let's, well, enter. So the first thing that Strapi is going to ask you to do, because this is your very first time accessing this application, is you're going to create a admin user. So this user can create whatever records, it can create other users. So this user is going to be a user that has access to this Strapi dashboard. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to say Laith Harb, and let's give my email here. And then let's give my password of, I'm just going to say password, very weak password. I'll show you that it's password for some reason. And then, you know, you can also keep me updated, blah, blah, blah. Let's not do that. And okay, very weak password. So let's change that to capital case. And then must contain one number. Okay, there we go. And once you do that, you can see here that you have access to the Strapi dashboard. How terrific is that? And so you can see here, you can go to the content management system, and we'll talk about all of this stuff, but you can go ahead and kind of explore around, see what's going on. But in the next section, we're actually going to start working on adding restaurants. So let's actually get into that. In this section, what we're going to do is learn about collection types inside of Strapi. So let's first remember what we're trying to do. So we're trying to serve the data for a website that looks like this. So what we want to do is we want to serve data regarding multiple restaurants. So how do we do that inside of Strapi? Let me just zoom in here for you guys so it looks a little bit more legible. So in order to do that, what we are going to do is go to our content type builder. So this is the content manager. This is where you actually add your content. Here is where you build your content type. And you can see here, right in the middle, right between this nav bar and this right here, you can see we have something called a collection type. We also have this other thing called a single type, and we also have this thing called a component. And we'll talk about these two a little bit later, but for now I want to focus in on the collection type. So the collection type is where we can store multiple entities. So for example, in our case, what we want to do is we want to store multiple restaurants. So we're going to add that inside of the collection type. The single type is where we store that entity just one time. So for example, in our store, there is an About Us page. So what we can do is we can add a single type for that About Us page, and then we can have the content for that About Us page. We're not going to have multiple About Us pages, so we're not going to, of course, add that in the collection type, but we are going to have multiple restaurants, so that's why we're going to put it in here. So you can kind of think of this in a programming sense as this is going to be an array of things, whereas this is just going to be one thing. All right, so let's get right into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this create new collection type. And then in here, you can see that there's a bit of configuration. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to give this collection type a name. So I'm going to call it restaurant. And you can see here that the singular is restaurant, and over here, this is restaurant. So this you don't really have to touch. So now what we can do is we can click on continue. And this is going to be what the entity is called, restaurant. Now, what is going to be inside of this entity? What are the content that a restaurant has? So if we were to go here, let's just click on a particular restaurant. You can see that, the content, we have multiple images. Okay, so we probably want to store that somewhere. We have the name of the restaurant. We have, the opening hours. And I know right here there isn't a description of the restaurant, but let's just add that in as well. So let's actually just go over here, and you can see that we can add multiple fields for the restaurant collection type. And the fields symbolize the different pieces of content that we want a restaurant type to have. For example, again, the name, the images, opening hours, etc. So let's go in here. And the first thing that I'm going to add is a name. So you can see here, and let me just zoom out. You can see that we have multiple different types of fields. We have text, we have email, password, enum, media, Boolean, whatever. So we can utilize any one of these. Now for a name, I want to utilize text because, well, that makes the most sense. I'm not going to have, a date for a name. I'm going to have text. And we're just going to call this name because this is going to be the name of the restaurant. So name, and let's just capitalize it. So this is going to be the name of the restaurant. And over here, you can see we have two different types of text. We can have short text. This is just best for titles, names, URLs, etc. And long text is better for descriptions or bibliographies. We're going to, of course, go with short text because, well, a name is very short. It shouldn't be that large. And then what I want to do is I want to also go to these advanced settings. And you can see here in the advanced settings, we can actually set a bunch of different things. We can have a default value. Now, of course, we don't want to have a default value for something like the name. We can also have some regex expression. So again, this is not something that we want to have, but we can also add, some regex if we want to. Now over here, you can see that we can add some additional settings. So for example, we can say that this is a required field. So you cannot create a restaurant without providing a name. And honestly, I think that makes a little bit of sense. So we're just gonna go ahead and check that off. Over here, you can see that this is another field called unique field. And this ensures that, well, we can't have two restaurants with the same name. I think this also makes sense, so we can go ahead and check that off. We can also give it a maximum length and a minimum length. I'm not going to do that. And we can also make it a private field, which I won't do. So that is the name. So let's add another field. Let's say we also want to add a description of the restaurant. So what we could do is we can go over here and we can add another field called text. And we can say here description, and we can make this long text. However, there's actually a better option for this, in my opinion. So what we can do is we can click cancel, and this is going to actually cancel the whole thing. So what we can do is we can click on this button right here, add another field, and I want to utilize rich text. And what rich text allows us to do is utilize Markdown. So if we just used large text before, we won't be able to do something like, highlighting, bolding, italics, and things of that nature, having, real good spacing. Whereas with rich text, we're able to do all this because what ends up happening is it utilizes Markdown. So we're just going to say description here, and we can go to the advanced settings. I think I'm okay with not providing it, so we'll just leave it, not making this required and etc. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Now, what's the next thing that we want? Well, we want some images. So let's actually store that in as well. So we want to use media for this. So we're going to say media, and we're going to say image. Now we can say multiple media or single. So single means that you can only put one image in there or one media item in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be an image. Whereas multiple is, well, when we want to have multiple images associated with this entity, restaurants. In this case, we want to have multiple images. As you can see, we have a carousel. So let's go ahead and we're going to utilize multiple media. Let's add that in. Now, what else do we want to add? Well, let's look at what's happening over here. Let me just zoom in. And my cat is going bonkers playing with a little toy, so don't mind him. So what I want to add is I want to add this, the opening hours. I want to forget about these other two for now. Let's just not add those because, well, they take, I don't know, they're kind of redundant. So I want to add the opening hours. So what I need to add is, well, I need to add first the days that we are open, so Tuesday to Saturday, and we also need to add the times that we are open. So I can go over here and add text, and I can say days we are open, and then add another field, and we can say, times that we are open. Or what we can do is we can actually group these content together. And this is where a component comes into place. So we can add another field and we can call this component. And we can create a new component. And we can say over here, we can call this component opening hours. And we can give this component a category. I'm gonna give this, restaurant information. So this is the category of this component. And we have to also give it an icon. Let's give it an icon of this, whatever. And then we can go ahead and we can configure this component. So restaurant info, configure this component. Let's call it, let's remove that space. What's going on here? It's not letting me work. All right, let's do restaurant info. And we're gonna configure this component. So let's go ahead. Configure, please. What are we missing this time? Seems like, there we go. Okay, there we go. So in here, what we can do is we can have a repeatable. So here we can have an array of it, or we can have a single component. So we're gonna click on single component. And then what we wanna do is we wanna add fields to this component. So in here, we're gonna first name our component. So we're gonna call this opening hours. Opening hours. And we're gonna add fields to this component. And again, let's make it like that. Add fields to this component. So inside of this component, what we want to do is we wanna add a text, and we wanna call this text, let's call it hours. So hours, and then we wanna add another field, and then in here, we wanna have days. So this is the opening hours where we are in hours and in days as well. And then we are pretty much done. So what we can do now is we can go ahead here, close this off and save it. And now you can see here that we have this opening hours component, and then we have this hours and days. So we can actually store, common fields inside of components. So the last thing that we have to do, we have our name, we have our description, we have our image, we have this stuff over here. The last thing we have to do is go ahead and save this. Now, once we save it, what we can do is we can go over here and you can see now we have another collection type. Now, if you ever made a mistake and you want to edit some things, of course, what you can do is you can just edit them over here. So you can edit the name. You can even completely delete the type if you want to by clicking delete. And of course, we don't want to do that because, well, we didn't make a mistake yet. So right now what you can do is you can go to the content manager. And now when you go to restaurant, what you can do is you can add a new entry. And so over here, you can add whatever entry you want. So let's go over here and let's add, I don't know if this is a real name of a restaurant. Let's click on this. Let's get this name over here. We're gonna add that in there. We're gonna add, this is a terrific, I don't know what kind of restaurant this is. It says vegan, whatever. We're just gonna say, this is a terrific vegan restaurant, that serves vegan food. What a terrific description. And then if we were to go here, let's actually steal some of these images. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna do a copy image, or we're actually gonna go ahead and save this image. So let's go ahead and save this image. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna click here and we're gonna go ahead and just drag and drop this image. Or I guess we can't do that. We're gonna go ahead and click that. And then we're gonna do drag and drop this image. And now we can upload this asset. And of course we can upload multiple assets if we want to. We can upload another asset. So let's go here. Maybe we wanna show this image. So let's save this image to our machine first. So we can drag and drop it. And then we can go ahead and drag and drop it. And now we can upload these two images, click finish. Now you can see we have these two images attached to this restaurant. Now in here, we can also add the opening hours. So we can add the hour, is this. And then in here, we can say something like Monday to Wednesday is when we're open. Now, if we wanted to have multiple hours, for example, maybe on the weekends we have different hours, we could have made this an array type. So that's where the array would have come into place. So now what we can do is we can actually save this. And if we were to go back, you can see now we have a new restaurant inside of our application. So now what we should be able to theoretically do is make an HTTP request and get this data back. So get this restaurant data back and potentially render it inside of our, either React, Next, Nux, Vue front end. And so let's actually do that in the next section. We created our restaurant collection type and we added a restaurant in there. But now what we want to do is we want to query for that restaurant. So in order to do this, let's just quickly remind ourselves exactly how Strapi works. So we have a front end, which could either be React, Vue, Angular, or any other front end framework, or even, again, vanilla JavaScript. And what it's going to do is make a request to our Strapi server, and then Strapi is going to forward that data to us. So what we need to do is we need to hit a specific endpoint to get all of the restaurants that we want. Now, in order to do this, what I'm going to utilize is a tool called Postman. So Postman is an excellent tool to test out your APIs, and you can do a bunch of different requests, get requests, post requests, delete requests. So if you don't have that installed, go ahead and install it. I'm just going to zoom in here, and I'm going to create a new collection called Strapi. So I'm going to say Strapi, and then inside of Strapi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a request. I'm going to call this request get restaurants. Get restaurants. So let's go ahead, and in here we're going to paste the endpoint for our application, or our get restaurants endpoint. So let me just get rid of all these other ones. Let's get rid of this, get rid of that, get rid of that. So what is the endpoint? Well, the endpoint is going to be our Strapi server, which is going to be localhost 1337. And then it's going to be /API and then /restaurant. So whatever your collection name is, if you want to get a list of all the restaurants, you're just going to make it plural. So you're going to be /restaurants. And now if you were to make this request, send this request off, it is not going to work because right now it is forbidden. So what this means is that Strapi by default is going to make everything not accessible to the public. So what we have to say is manually say that, hey, this restaurant data is accessible to the public. In order to do this, we're going to go to settings right over here. And then let me just zoom in once more. And then we are going to go to roles right over here. So there's two roles. There's the administration panel roles. We're not going to go there yet. We're going to go over here to the user and permissions plugin. We're going to go to roles. Then we're going to click on public. And this right here will allow us to define, and let me just zoom out a bit. What this is going to do is allow us to define all of the endpoints as well as the things that anybody can do. So over here, what we can do is we can go to permissions and we can go to restaurants. And then in here, let me just zoom in once more. I guess we can't, kind of looks a little awkward once we zoom in at that point. What we can do is we can say, okay, the public can find one restaurant. So find means they can find multiple. So a list of restaurants. Find one means they can query for one specific restaurant based on the ID. And you can see here that the endpoint is actually shown over here. Now, we probably don't want the public to have the ability to create a restaurant, delete a restaurant, or update a restaurant. We probably want our own admin users that actually have access to the Strapi dashboard to do that. But we want them to have access to this. So let's go ahead and save that. And once we actually save this, let me just get rid of this for now. It's in the way at this point. So let's go here. And what we want to do is we want to execute this again. So let's execute that. And now you can see we're actually getting back some data. Let me just zoom out a bit. We are actually getting back some data. However, we're getting back an empty array. So what's going on there? We actually have a restaurant inside of our application. What's going on? Why is it that we're only getting back an empty array? Because remember, if we go back to our content manager, well, we have a restaurant. Well, you probably guessed, the restaurant state is in draft. So we have to explicitly say that we want to publish this. So in order to publish it, all we have to do is click on publish. And there we go, we published it. And now if we were to make this request again, you can see here that, well, we're getting that restaurant. So we're getting the ID, and then we're getting the attributes. And the attributes is the name, the description, and then there's additional attributes such as when it was created at, when it was updated at, when it was published. And you might be thinking, well, wait a second, where is the images? Where's the image information? Where's the opening hours information? And it's actually not displayed on purpose. So we actually have to explicitly ask for these types of information. And the reason for that is because of performance. Because sometimes when we try to query these things, it might get really big. And it can decrease the performance of your application. So what we have to do is explicitly ask for some of the things like the media types, the relationships that we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the components. But I'll talk about how we can actually query for this, as well as do some filtration in the next section. We saw that we are able to query for our restaurants. However, all of the fields weren't populated. For example, we couldn't see any of the images. We also couldn't see any of the opening hours. Now, again, by default, what ends up happening is the component fields, the image fields, as well as the relationship fields that we'll talk about in a later section aren't going to be populated for performance reasons. We have to explicitly ask for them inside of the route. So let's actually learn how to do that. So in order to do that, what we need to do is modify our URL. But before we actually get into that, I want to go and take a side tangent and talk about this data that we get back. As you can see here, the data that we get back, most of the case, it's in a camel case. That's the format that we get back. However, over here, we can see that this right here is capitalized. So I actually don't like this, and I want everything to be camel case. So let's quickly fix this right now. So in order to fix this, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our content builder. We're going to edit the name field, and we're simply just going to lowercase it. And we're going to click finish, and then if we edit it again, we should see lowercase. Now let's go back to our content manager, or let's give this a quick save. Let's give it a quick second. And if this stays stuck forever, what you can simply do is just, oh, it doesn't, so that's fine. So now what you can do is you can see everything is completely fine. Let's actually do the same thing for the opening hours. What I want to do is I want to camel case this, so just lowercase this. And then let's finish that off. Let's go over here, finish it off. What we can do is we can go over here now, let's go over here and let's edit this. We're gonna edit this so that the hours are also lowercase. We're gonna say this. We're gonna finish this one, and then over here we're gonna say that the days are also lowercase. So finish that. Let's quickly save that. I think we're gonna have to lowercase the opening hours again. Just give it a quick second. Awesome. And then over here, let's go back to the restaurant. I think I didn't. Yeah. Let's just go ahead. I didn't save it. Let's finish that. Let's save that again. And there we go. So now if we were to make this request again, and let's do it. So let's go here. Let's make this request again. I get the data all lowercase, all in camel case. All right, awesome. But that doesn't, of course, solve the issue of, well, I want to maybe populate the images. I want to populate the opening hours. So in order to populate something, what we're going to have to do is modify this route. So over here, let me just zoom in once more. What we're going to do is we're going to add query params. So query params are specified by adding the question mark. So adding the question mark after the route. So we're going to do shift question mark. And then in here, we're going to say populate. And we're going to specify exactly what we want to populate. So do we want to populate the opening hours? Well, if we want to populate the opening hours, we would just say populate, and then we can say opening hours. So if we were to execute this now, and we were to scroll to our data, you can see now we have the opening hours. Now you can see the opening hours turned into null because of our modified changes. So let's quickly go over here and let's fix that. So we're gonna go here, let's add Monday to Wednesday, or this should be in the days section. And then here we can say 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So let's go ahead and save that very quickly. Saved, and now if we were to make this request again, you can see that we get our opening hours. There we go. Awesome. And of course we can specify other things. Maybe we want the images. So if we go to our content manager, maybe we want to get these images as well. So what we could very simply do is say comma and then image. And if we were to make this request again, you can see that this time, let me just zoom out of here. This time we get our opening hours and we also get our images. And specifically for the images, and what's really nice about Strapi is it really modifies these images for you. So you can see here we have thumbnail images, we also have medium-sized images, and we also have small images. But you can see that this is a lot of JSON code. So by default, it is actually really good that we're not getting this data back and we have to explicitly ask for it. Now, just to show you quickly how the images work, you can grab this over here. Let's grab the URL. So you can see here that everything has a URL. So let's just grab that URL. And the URL looks like, let me just paste it in here for now. So the URL looks something like this. So it's going to be whatever our API is, then /upload/thumbnail, and then that specific image. So for us, we're working locally. So let's go here. And it's going to look something like this. http/localhost and then /upload/ whatever. So what we can do is we can just very simply add that in here. And you can see that we get our image. So you can see that over here. Now this image is let's see here what size it is. It's mostly, I think, for thumbnails. If you want to use, maybe an image for a desktop, you can pick a larger image. So let's see what the right image for this. You can see here medium, and then over here small. So maybe this image right here would be more suited for larger images, because you can see that this one's a little bit blurry. So if we were to execute that, okay, you can see that that's a lot better, less blurry and bigger. So if you want to use a thumbnail, you want to use the thumbnail images. If you want to use larger images like this, then you can use this one. Obviously, the reason why you would want to use the thumbnail image, even though it might be smaller and lower quality, is because it's just better for rendering performance. And obviously, what the smaller the thing is you probably don't have to worry that much about quality. All right, cool. So that's pretty much populate. That's really all we have to know about populating things. If, however, you just want to populate everything and you really don't care what it is, you don't want to specifically specify it, all you have to do is populate, and then you can do just populate star. And then if you were to execute this, you can see that, well, we get everything back. So that is population. We learned how to populate fields that we don't get right off the bat. We don't get by default. Now in this section, I want to teach you how we can filter for specific fields that we don't want to see. So we learned how we can populate things that we don't get right off the bat. We don't get by default. In this section, what I want to teach you is how we can actually filter out for certain fields. So for example, if we were to run this request over here, /restaurants, you can see that we always are going to get back the name, describe, created at, updated at, and purchased at. Now, let's say what we were doing is we were trying to simply render this page right over here. And all we really needed is the image and the name. We didn't care about when it was published, we didn't care about when it was created at, we don't care about the description. For now, in terms of the attributes that we automatically get back, well, we just need the name. And then we also need the image, which we don't get back. So how are we able to do this? Well, in order to do this, what we need to do is specify the fields query param. So by default, what ends up happening is we have this fields query param and it's equal to star. So it's equal to star, which means, hey, we want to give you back everything. However, in this case, we only want the name. So what we're going to say is fields is equal to name. And you can see right now, all we get back is the name. Let me just kind of get rid of that. And maybe I can actually zoom in at this point. There we go. And you know what? No, I can't. Apologies if this is too small. But you can see here now, we're only getting back the name. Now, in order to populate the things that we normally don't get back, like again, the images, the relationships, the component types, we have to add another query param, which is populate. So what we can say here is and populate. And then we can say that's equal to image. And now you can see that we have the name and the image. So this is the only data that we need to render this stuff right over here. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. And of course, inside of the fields, we can ask for multiple things. So maybe we also want the published at. So what we can say is comma published at. We can execute this, and now you can see we get the name, we get the published at. So this is kind of acting like a GraphQL. Now, of course, if you want to really just utilize GraphQL rather than a REST API, you can just utilize GraphQL because Strapi supports creating a GraphQL server, which we'll look at a little bit later. But that's pretty much really all we have to know. So of course, what we can do is we can have specify what fields we want, and we can specify what things we want to populate. In this section, we're going to move on to a very important concept in Strapi called relationships. Now, to explain this, what we're going to do is we're going to implement a new feature inside of our app. What we want to be able to do is to group restaurants into specific categories. So for example, maybe we had a bunch of French restaurants. We want to put that in the French category. Maybe we have a bunch of breakfast restaurants that only serve breakfast. Well, I want to put that inside of the breakfast category. Now, of course, we can actually put multiple restaurants into multiple categories. Maybe, for example, this restaurant over here only serves breakfast and they only serve French breakfast. So, well, we want to put that inside of both the French category as well as the breakfast category. So what we need to do is we need to create a new entity called category and somehow relate it to the existing entity, which is the restaurants. So let's just begin with what we know, and that is creating a new entity. And remember, the entity is going to be a collection type because we can have multiple categories. We can have, again, French, breakfast, African, Italian, etc. So in order to create a new collection type, let's go to our content type builder. And I'm just going to click here. Hopefully I didn't really make any changes. And in here, let me zoom out a bit. In here, what we're going to do is click on a new collection type. And then right inside of this collection type, we're going to call this category. And you can see here that we get the singular as well as the plural. So this is if you wanted to make a query for one specific category. Here, if we want to make a query for multiple categories. So what we're going to do is we're going to click continue. And then in here, very simply, we're going to make this as simple as possible. We just want to add text to the name of the category. So we're going to call this name, and it's going to be a short text. Finish. We're going to go ahead and save that. Let's give that a quick moment. Let's give it a quick moment. Hopefully, there we go. Awesome. Cool. So now what we want to do is let's just go ahead and let's add a new category. And of course, to do this, we're gonna have to go to our content manager and we're gonna add a new entry. And we're gonna call this entry, let's say French. So French food. Let's go ahead and save that. And let's go back. So now we can see that we have French food in there. Let's add a new entry as well. Let's add breakfast. So we're gonna say breakfast. And we're gonna go ahead and save that. And let's add one more entry. So let's go here. Let's say Italian food. Awesome. So let's save this. So let's publish all of them because right now none of them are published. So let's go here, publish, and then lastly, let's go here and publish. Cool. So now we have these categories. However, they're not linked to any particular restaurants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add maybe another 3 restaurants, and I'm really just going to focus in on the name. So you can see here when we actually change the name of the name, you can see that the order has changed. So you can see that now it's all the way in the bottom. I would actually prefer all the way at the top. So what we could do is configure the view, and we can move the name all the way up here. So we can move that name, save it, give it a few moments, and then if you go back, you can see that we have the name all the way back up. Awesome. And of course, you can configure the view however way you want. So the only thing that's required is the name. So that's the only thing I'm going to add just for time's sake. Let's just go here and let's just get some of these names. So this name right here, let's get that. And let's save that. And we are going to publish it as well. And let's get some more restaurants up in here so we can have more entries. So let's go here. Let's get this one. This one looks very French. And of course, if you're not on the website, I'll have this in the link in the description below, but you can just make up whatever name you want. Doesn't really matter. Let's add a few more entries, maybe 2 more. Let's have whatever this is. Let's copy that. More French food. You know what? Let's get an Italian food. This right here says Italian. So we're going to say Italian, save, publish. And then the last thing that I want to get is, let's get this cheese restaurant that just serves you cheese. So let's go to back here. We're going to add one more. And we're going to add this, save, and publish. So now you can see we have a bunch of different restaurants. We have 3 different categories, but the link between these 2 doesn't exist yet. So in order to create this link, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the categories, and we're going to go to the content builder. We're going to go to the categories, and we're going to add another field. Now this field is going to be a special field because it's going to be right here inside in the bottom, which is going to be the relation field. So we're going to click on this. Let me zoom in here. So you can see here that we have this output right over here. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that a category is going to have a relationship with a restaurant. So a category is going to have a relationship with a restaurant. Now, by default, it's saying that a category has a relationship with a category. What we can do is very simply change this entity to restaurant. And now we have to specify what type of relationship we want to have. So right here, we're saying that a category has 1 restaurant. Well, this doesn't really make that many sense because a category can have multiple restaurants in it, and then a restaurant can also have multiple categories within it. So what we want to actually specify is this right over here. So categories has and belongs to many restaurants. So a category can have multiple restaurants, and then a restaurant can have multiple categories. And this is known as a many-to-many relationship. So what we can do is we can actually click finish here. Let me zoom out a bit. And now what we can do is we can click save. And at that point, we should have the categories. So we should have the categories. So now what we can do is we can go back to our content manager. And then if we go to French food, for example, let me zoom out once more. you can see here that we have this relation. So we have this relation that we didn't have before. And then in here, we can just simply select all of the restaurants that fall into the French food category. So for example, we can select this, we can select this, we can select this. And now what we can do is we can save that. And now we have this many-to-many relationship. So you can see here that we have a category and it's related to multiple restaurants. Now what we can do is we can go to breakfast as well and select whatever we feel is also breakfast. So maybe this and then this are breakfast. And then lastly, let's go to Italian. Maybe there's one Italian restaurant. Sorry, what was that called again? Whatever this thing is. I can't pronounce any of these, so let's go here. Let's save that. So now we have these relationships. How terrific is that? And you can see that the relationships actually go two ways. Let me zoom in once more. Actually, I can't do that. You can see here that if I were to click on a particular restaurant, you can see that now this is in the French food category as well as the breakfast category. All right, awesome. So maybe what we want to do is we want to do something like this, where we query for all of the restaurants in a particular category. So we want to have something like this. Let me just zoom in once more. So we want to click on French, and we only get the French food. Well, what we can actually do now is query for a specific category, and then query for the relationship, which is the restaurants within that category. So just for a quick example, what we can do is, well, before we do that, what we need to do is we need to make the categories accessible to everybody. So let's go to settings, let's go to roles, let's go to public, and let's go here, and we're going to check off find and find one. We're going to save that. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to change the API to /categories. So what this is going to do is going to give us all of the categories. You can see it's giving us French food, it's going to give us breakfast, it's going to give us Italian. And well, we don't want all the categories. What we want is we want the category as well as the restaurants. So let's specify that we don't want any of these other stuff. So we just want the name of the category. So what we can say here is fields, and we're going to say name so that we don't get any of the other stuff back. And then we also want to populate the relationship. So we're going to say and populate, and we're going to say populate is equal to, and we want to get the restaurants. So we're going to say restaurants. And if we were to execute this, now you can see that we're getting the name and we're getting all of the restaurants. And this is actually how we can really perform this filter over here. This filter right over here. Now, the only issue that we're really facing is that we're getting all of the categories and all of the restaurants. However, what we might want to do is just simply query for one category and get all of those restaurants. Now, in order to do this, we need to change our route. So over here, we specify the singular. We want to get just one category. And then we do / whatever that category ID is. So in this case, it's 1 well, no, it's going to be for French food, it's going to be 1. Yes. So 1. So we're looking at this ID. And then we are going to put 1 in there, /1. And then if we were to execute this, we get it's not found for some reason. So let me actually just remove this for now. So we're getting it's not found, maybe 2, 3. Okay, I'm not sure actually what is not found. Let's go over here. Oh, okay. So it's category. So it's not singular. It's still category /1. And now we only get 1. Now we can add these other fields. And you can see here that now we only get the French restaurant as well as their categories. Awesome. And that is really how we perform relationships. Now, one thing I want to quickly note is the relationship types that we can have. So I'm just going to quickly add, maybe not a new entry. I'm going to quickly add another field. I'm going to have the relationship. Now, over here, you can see that we have multiple different relationship types. So you can see here, you know, a category, maybe we can add it to restaurant as well. So over here, a category has and belongs to one restaurant. So this is a one-to-one relationship. This is a one-to-many relationship where a category has multiple restaurants. And then over here we have another relationship where a restaurant has multiple categories. So this is another one-to-many relationship. And over here we have another many-to-many relationship. And these are relatively self-explanatory. I hope they make sense, and you can just pretty much utilize the one that you want. All right, so that is relationships. In this section of the course, we're going to learn how we can sort our entities back. So for example, maybe we want to get the categories inside of alphabetical order. So let's remove this over here, and you can see that we get back, and let's remove also populate restaurants. What we can see here is we get back French food, breakfast, Italian. Maybe for some reason we want to get these back in alphabetical order. Well, this is actually really easy. All we have to do is add another query param. So we're going to say and this query param is called sort. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say sort is equal to, and then, well, the field that we want to sort by. In this case, we want to sort by the name of the attribute, so, or the name of the category. So we're going to say search, or we're going to send off this request, and you can see here that now this is getting sorted. Now by default, what ends up happening is that it sends in ascending order. If we want to sort by descending order, what we can very simply do is add colon and then descending, or des, which is the abbreviation. So you can see here that now we're doing this in descending order. Now, of course, we can sort by multiple things. So if, for example, you know, we have two names that are Italian, which shouldn't be possible, but if we do, what we can do is we can say, okay, well, if we have two names that are Italian, then what we want to do is we want to sort by another field at that point. So what we can say is maybe created at. So when it was created. So now if we were to send off this request, nothing really is going to change. But again, this symbolizes that we can sort by multiple things. So this is really simple. It's not that difficult, and quite a small lecture. In this section, what we're going to do is learn about how we can filter for specific fields. Now, in order to do this, what I want to do is go to our content builder, and then I want to go to restaurants, and I want to add another field. And this field is going to be the average price of a particular meal at that restaurant. And so this is going to be a number. So we're going to say number. And then in here, I'm going to say av. So av, and then price, standing for the average price of a meal. And over here, we can choose our format. It could be an integer, it could be a big integer. I'm going to use decimal. So we're going to use decimal for this. And then we're just going to go ahead and finish. We're going to click finish. We're going to go ahead and save this. Let's give it a few moments. Let's wait, come on, let's go. Awesome. And so now what I want to do is let's go to our content manager, and inside of our restaurants, I want to add some average price. So over here, the average price of whatever this restaurant is. So maybe the average meal costs $30. So let's save that. And then let's go back to restaurants. And then over here, maybe the average meal here costs $45, super expensive. Let's go here. And let's go over here. Let's add $10 for this one. This one's very cheap. And then let's go here. Let's say this one $20. And then the last one, which is the cheese one, let's say this one, you know, this cheese is super expensive. $90 is the average spend. Okay, so let's go back here. And what I want to do is I want to query for a bunch of restaurants. So we're going to go here, query for all these restaurants. And now you can see here that we also get the average price. But what if we wanted to query for all of the restaurants that are below $30 average price? So anything that's super top-notch expensive, I'm not interested in. And we want to actually have that feature inside of our application. I know here it doesn't have it, but maybe we do. Maybe we want to have a feature where they can filter by price. Well, how do we do that? Well, what we can actually utilize is the, filter param. So we can say filter, and then in here, we can very simply say that we want to filter by, well, what do we want to filter? Well, we want to filter by the average price. So we're going to say average price, and then here we're going to specify what we want to filter by with brackets. So these square brackets. And then we're going to say we want to filter by average price. And then we want to specify that we want the average price to be less than or equal to 30. So how do we do that? Well, we add another square bracket, and then in here we need to add something known as an operator. Now this operator is going to specify how we want to filter. In this case, we want to filter by less than or equal to a specific number. So we're going to say $, and then less than or equal to. So over here is LTE, which stands for less than or equal to. And then we're going to say equal to 30. So right here what we're doing is we're saying that, hey, we want to filter for the average price that is less than or equal to 30. So now if we were to execute this, so if we were to quickly execute this, now you can quickly see that of course it doesn't work. Now I wonder why that is. Let's look at that again. Let's execute it again. It does not work. The reason why that didn't work is, first of all, this should be filters. And then second of all, we shouldn't have this equal sign. So it should be filters and then square bracket right over here. So now if we were to execute this again, you can see that it works. So now you can see here that we're filtering by all the restaurants that have a price that is less than or equal to 30. So we have this, we get this, and then we get this. Now, if we want all of the restaurants that are less than 30, we can just change the operator. So we could just say less than. And now we only get these two restaurants. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what are the different operators that I can utilize? In order to do this, the best thing that you can utilize is the documentation. So let's go to the documentation, the developer docs. And then let's go to the API reference. Let me just zoom in here for you guys. So you would go to the developer resources, API reference, and you would go to the REST API. And then in here, you can just click on filters, and you can see many of the different operators. So we have equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, in, which you would just specify an array, and it makes sure that this thing is inside of that array, not in, contains, not contains. So you can see here there's a bunch of different things that you can do, and there's also a bunch of different examples. In this section of the video, what we're going to do is add another entity as well as another relationship within our Strapi application. So specifically what I want to do is, if I were to click on a particular restaurant, you can see here that if I were to scroll down, you can see that I can get the reviews. And you can see that there are multiple reviews associated to a particular restaurant. And so what I want to do is I want to add this reviews entity. So in order to do this, let's go here to our content manager. We're going to go to our builder, and we're going to add review. So we're going to say review. So we're going to say review here. We're going to go continue. And then in here, we're going to make this as simple as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to text. And inside of the text, or we're going to just say long text for this. We're going to say the review itself, or maybe we can call this content. And then advanced setting, we're going to say that this is required. You need to have a review, and unique, well, we don't want a unique field. And then we want to just give it a star rating. So some sort of star rating. Now, what we could do is we could give this a number. So it could be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. However, I want to be more precise with it. You can only really give us a review of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick an enum. So an enum is going to look something like this. And in here, I'm going to say rating. Now in here, I'm going to say you can give us a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So these are the only values that you can give us. You can't give us anything other than this. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna say that this is also a required field, and we can just say finish. Now the other thing that we want to do is actually add another field, and this is going to be the relationship. Now a relationship, the review is going to be related to the restaurant, not a category. So we're not going to be able to review a category, we're going to be able to review a restaurant. Now what is the relationship here? Well, a restaurant can have multiple reviews, but any one review should belong to only one restaurant. Let me quickly say that again. So any one restaurant, so for example, this restaurant right here can have multiple reviews. So you can see here it has 5 reviews. However, this one review specifically should not belong to multiple restaurants. So this review specifically shouldn't be with this restaurant and then another restaurant. It should only be tied to one restaurant. So what we want is a one-to-many relationship. So if we go over here, we're gonna say that a review, so a review can have multiple, can only belong to one restaurant. So a better way of phrasing it is a restaurant can have multiple reviews. So what we want to do is we want to specify this relationship. Restaurant has many reviews. So let's click on finish, zoom out a bit, out one more. We're going to click on save, and there we go. So we're going to save that. Now, here's the thing. We don't want our admin users that have access to this particular dashboard to add reviews. We don't want to have that. We actually want the users to have the ability to create reviews. So what we might want to do is give those users the ability to create data inside of our database. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to go to settings. I don't know what happened there. Let's refresh. We're going to go to settings. We're going to go to roles. We're going to go to public. And what we can say here is, well, a public can find. They can also find one review. And if they want, they can also create a review. So they can also create a review. So what we can do is we can go ahead and save this. And now what we need to do is learn how we can give our users the ability to create entities. And let's actually get to that in the next section. In this section, what we're going to do is learn how we can execute post requests in order to create data. Now, specifically what we want to do is we want to have the ability to create a review. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Postman. And then right in here, we're going to create a post request. So we're going to say here /APIs/review. And let's actually take a very quick look at the endpoint. So you can see here /API/reviews. And then inside of the request body, we need to add some data. So we're going to say raw, and then we're going to say JSON. And then in here, we need to specify the content of the review as well as the stars. So over here, we can specify that by first specifying that we want to add some data. And then in here, we're going to say the content. And then we can say that this is going to be, maybe this was great. I love this restaurant. This is a great restaurant. Great restaurant. And then we can specify a rating of 4 maybe. Now, of course, what we want to do is we want to link this restaurant or we want to link this review to a particular restaurant. So in order to do that, all we have to do is say quote restaurant and then specify the ID of the restaurant. I'm going to say ID of 3. And that should correlate to whatever restaurant has an ID of 3, which is, let's see here, which is this restaurant, cafe, whatever. So if I were to click on this, you can see that this restaurant at this point has 0 reviews. If I were to execute this now, and we were to look here, it seems like everything is successful. This is a great restaurant, rating of 4. And now if I were to refresh this, Now you can see that this restaurant actually has a review. So you can see here that we have this review right over here. Now, if we were to go to the review, you can see that we got this is a great restaurant, and we also have a rating of 4. And now this is linked to this restaurant. Awesome. So that's really all we have to do to learn about creating data. Now, one thing that I want to note, and we aren't going to get to this in this crash course, but of course you can update data as well as delete data. And I just want to show you, if you want to learn more about that, what you can very simply do is go to the documentation. I'll have this in the link in the description below. Let's zoom in once more. So you can see different ways that you can get entries, get one entry, create entries, update entries, and delete entries. By the way, all of the information that I'm just talking about in this video is coming straight from this documentation here. And actually they have more details as well if you want to read up more and you want to become an even better GraphQL expert, or not GraphQL, Strapi expert. So what we can do here is we can just click on update an entry. So to update an entry, this is going to be the request. So it's going to be /API/restaurants and then / whatever restaurant ID you want to update. And then inside of the rec.body, you're going to have the data. So we're going to say here data, just like we had inside of the post request. But here we're going to specify that we want to change the title of the restaurant to hello. Maybe we want to change the relationship. So we can change the relationship of the restaurant to maybe 4 or whatever. So that's updating. And then this is deleting. So deleting is a lot simpler actually. We don't have to put anything inside of the body. Now notice that for update, it's a put request. It's not a post request. And for delete, it's a delete request. And it looks exactly the same as the put, except we're not going to put anything inside of our body. We're just going to click on this over here. Now we're not going to get to that in this because it's relatively simple. And if you understand how to make a post request, I'm going to assume this would be relatively easy how to make a put or a delete request. Okay, so that is really pretty much it. Another thing I want to quickly cover is authentication. So what if this route over here, we just wanted our authenticated users to have access to that route? Only people that are logged into our application have access to creating a review. So let's actually talk about that in the next section. In this section, we're going to learn all about how we can add authentication to our Strapi application. Now, one thing I want to note is the different types of users that we can have inside of Strapi. So if we were to go to settings over here and you go to administration panel, what you can do is you can create users that have access to this Strapi dashboard. And you can have multiple users. You can have an author, so a person that can manage content. Over here, an editor, so this is a person that can edit content, and a super admin, a person that can do whatever. But these administration panel users are users that have access to the Strapi dashboard that we're in right now. And you can see that we have myself over here, and I have super admin access. If I have another person that I want working on my project, I can create a new user, and then I can give them, I can input their email, and they can give them whatever access they want. Now, there's another type of user known as just simple authenticated users. And these are the users that you actually see right over here. And these are any users that can come into our applications, visit our website, and very simply log in. And now they're just authenticated users within our application. However, they don't have access to the Strapi dashboard. They're just authenticated. They're limited to what we present inside of the front end. So over here, what we can actually do is we can go to these settings, we can go to the roles, and we can specify what authenticated users can do. So over here, we've been primarily dealing with public users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to reviews. I'm going to say public users cannot create a review. Only authenticated users can do that. So now what we can do is we can click on authenticated, and then when we go to categories, let's say that they can find one. They can also find one restaurant. However, they cannot create a restaurant. And then in here, they can find one and create a review. So now if we were to save this, that is awesome. And now if I try to make this exact same request again, I get an error, and I get a forbidden error. So only users that are authenticated within my application are able to make this post request. Now you might be asking, well, how am I going to authenticate users? Well, very simple. Strapi has an endpoint called /API/local/register. So any user that wants to get authenticated, what they need to do is hit this particular route right over here. And this is going to be a post request. Now inside of the rec.body, we need to specify the credentials of the user. So if you go to our content manager, you can see that a user has a username as well as an email. So we're going to go over here and we're going to say username is going to be, let's just call myself Laith Harb. And we're going to say email is going to be, let's just say laith@laith.laith. What a great email. And then we're going to specify the password of that particular user. So password, and we're not going to be, so the user is going to actually hit this endpoint and we're going to be passing this data in. So then we're going to say, let's say the password is password1 or password exclamation mark. And now once we hit this endpoint, this method is not allowed. The reason why that didn't work is that it should be /API/auth/local/register. And we also, for authentication, we don't want to have this data object. So it's just going to be an object with user, email, and password. So now if we were to send this off, you can see that we get back a response. And specifically, we get back this JSON web token. And if you don't know what JSON web tokens are and you're really interested in learning about authentication, I do have a JWT crash course that you can take. But this is what we're going to utilize in order to send authenticated requests. So this is a token that ensures we are who we are and we are authenticated. So let's actually just quickly copy this. And let's go to our content manager. If you go to users, you can see that we have created this new user. And now what I want to do is I want to add a review. This user wants to add a review. So in order to add a review, let's go /API and we're going to go /reviews. So we're going to go /reviews. And then inside of the body, I'm just going to quickly do a Control-Z until I can go back to what we had before. And I want to add this request. However, at this point, we're not authenticated. So this is an unauthenticated request. Just because we created this user, what we need to do is we need to attach this token to this request. So if I were to make this request again, let me just quickly copy this token to make sure we still have it. So if I were to make this request again, you can see that we get a 403 forbidden. Now, in order to make this an authenticated request, what we need to do is go to our header. And inside of our header, we need to specify a authorization key. And then in here, we can say bearer and then that token. So if this doesn't make much sense to you, this is how we make authenticated requests. And again, I do have a crash course that teaches this. So go ahead and take that if you want to learn. So now what we can do is we can send this off again. And now it works completely fine. So this is how we can make authenticated requests. So now if we go to reviews, we can see now we have 2 reviews for the same restaurant. Awesome. And of course we can change the restaurant. But that right there is authentication. In this section, we're going to learn about single types. So let's go over to our food website. And what if we wanted to manage the content with this About Us page? Well, what we can do is add a content type, but that doesn't really make all that much sense. The reason why it doesn't make much sense to add this collection type is because we don't have multiple About Us pages. We only have one. Well, at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to add a single type, and we're going to call this something like About Us. So About Us. So we're going to say About Us like that. And then we're going to go here, we're going to say continue. And then over here, we can add whatever it is that we want. So we can go back to our website. Really, all we have inside of this content type is the rich media. So let's go here, or the rich text. We can say here, and we can just say content. And if we want, we can also add other fields for the links as well. So the Facebook links, the Twitter links, the Slack links, but I don't want to do that because you guys probably get the point. So we're going to say here, we're going to go ahead and save this. Let's just wait. And now what we can do is we can go to the content manager, and you can see that whereas over here, we can have a list of different things. The single type, we only have one thing. Now you can add whatever it is that you want. So you can see here, you can add whatever you want. You can add spacing. You can also make things bold if you want. So over here, you can bold it. Over here, you can italicize some things. And this is in Markdown. So now if you go to preview mode, you get this for some reason. I'm not sure why that's not really working. Let's fix that a little bit. Let's see. I'm actually a little surprised. It should show you the preview where everything is bolded, but it's not. You guys probably get the point though. I'm not sure actually why that's not working. But that's pretty much all you have to know about single types. I'm not really gonna query for this or anything because the way that we query for things is exactly the same. I'm just gonna go ahead and save it. I just wanted to show you. In this video, what we're gonna do is learn how we can convert our Strapi REST API to a Strapi GraphQL server. And luckily, this is really, really easy. All we have to do is we need to go to our terminal. We need to move into our restaurants directory, wherever our Strapi application is. And we're gonna execute yarn Strapi and then install GraphQL. And I'm always getting this error. You guys probably are not getting this error. I have to append sudo or prepend sudo. And now you can see now we're installing the GraphQL dependencies. So let's just wait a little bit here. This might take some time, so I might have to pause the video. But this is how we can add GraphQL into our Strapi application. So let's just wait here a bit. I don't care how long this ends up being. I am just going to wait it out. Now, once that's done, what you can do now is very simply do yarn develop again. And now, of course, I'm getting a permission error. So I'm going to do sudo yarn develop. And what this should do is just rerun our application. So right now it's off because we closed the terminal. So it should rerun it. And if I were to refresh this, you can see that everything is fine. However, now what we can actually do is go to localhost 1337, and then we can say /GraphQL. So /GraphQL. And now if you were to enter this, you can see we enter the GraphQL playground. If you're familiar with GraphQL, this is what it looks like. And then in here, you can perform whatever query you want. So you want the me query. We also have review query, reviews queries, a lot of different queries. So we can say restaurants, and we can ask specifically for what we want. We want the data. Let me zoom in here for a bit. We want the name. Well, what's going on here? The name, or the ID, I guess, the ID of the restaurant. Let's actually go to the documentation. I'm not really sure exactly how this looks like. So let's go over to the docs and let's filter for a specific over here. We get the data, and then, okay, then we have the attributes, and then the attributes is gonna have the name, the description, image, opening hours, all these different things. So we can say here ID, we can say attributes, we can say name. And now if we were to run this query, you can see that we get all of the restaurants as well as their names. We can also, if you want the opening hours, you can specify that we want the hours. There we go. If we want the images, you can specify that we want, I don't know, maybe the large image. Let's see here, ID. They have attributes as well, so get the attributes, and then let's get the width. Oh, I guess the width is a type itself. I'm not sure. You're gonna have to read the documentation on this. But you can see here that we're getting the width. I'm not really sure how we can get the URL. We're gonna have to look at the docs for that. Of course, you can also perform mutations, and if you want to add that authorization header, you can add it right over here. This is just for all of you GraphQL fanatics. And everything that we learned about when it comes to filtering, sorting, all these things, you can also do inside of GraphQL. Now, we're not going to cover that because then this course will be insanely long. However, what you can very simply do is, well, as per usual, go to the documentation, go to API reference, and then you can go to GraphQL API, and you can see here, it teaches you how you can query for things, mutate things, filter. So you can see here, filter. So you can see that this is how we filter for things. So it seems as though we can just have a filter field right over here inside of the restaurants. So let's just say here, we have sort, filters, pagination, whatever. And that's how we can work with GraphQL inside of Strapi.